The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Sorry to be a little slow in getting to my feet. The member resumed his speech far quicker than I would have thought. I was a bit concerned that he thinks that this legislation will fix the issue of asbestos piping in Dallington. I hope we don't quite get to that level of operational detail, but not nearly as much as I hope that those issues are resolved quickly for the good citizens of Dallington. Mr. Speaker, as many people have said tonight, this is quite an unusual piece of legislation to deal with what I hope remains a very unusual series of events in terms of the strength of the earthquake and the number of aftershocks. They're just sort of part of our lives now. In fact, the language has changed a lot in Canterbury. When we have aftershocks now, we don't shudder and race to the door and say, what was that? We say, we think that was about a 3.9 or maybe a 4.2. We've all become Richter scale and geological experts. We can probably guess at how shallow each quake was and where the centre was. That's part of our response, actually, in dealing with what was a huge and scary issue for all of us. People in my electorate in Port Hills and people in our city and our region want to know that Parliament is behind our recovery. And for me, one of the most important things about the debate today is that this bill shows Parliament's commitment to supporting the rebuild of Canterbury. We have had a cross-party approach right from the first time of the earthquake. Actually, we all resolved that this was an issue that had so traumatised our residents and so damaged our structures that party politics would be put to one side. We all feel our politics deeply, that's why we're in this place. But we have not had any political point scoring or used other people's disadvantage to our own advantage, and I think that's to all of our credit. So we've responded in what I think is an unusual way for our Parliament. We haven't scored points at other people's expense because we know that people are already dealing with huge stresses and challenges in responding to the quakes, and this bill further demonstrates that commitment. But today, Mr. Speaker, as we progress this bill under urgency without the opportunity for scrutiny from a select committee, because we wanted to get this set up with some literal urgency, we've also expressed our concern about what I consider as quite an extreme nature of this legislation. It is very unusual. It is unusual for Parliament to agree to put aside statutory powers that Parliament has agreed to and put them in the hands of ministers through an order in council process. I was very pleased that my colleagues Clayton Cosgrove and Charles Chauvel, who have been leading the discussions with the Minister, received agreement that all those changes would be scrutinised by the Regulations Review Committee. That is an important part of the process, but it is very limited compared to the opportunities that are available under general statutory powers. So we have expressed concerns about the nature of the legislation that was considered to be an appropriate response to the events in Christchurch. The original consideration, in fact, right up until last Saturday, just 3 days ago, was that the emergency legislation would just amend a whole lot of other bills. So we had proposed amendments to the Resource Management Act, to the transport legislation, to the building legislation, to the local government legislation, and in my view, having that specificity that Parliament could say this part of the Resource Management Act could be truncated for the purposes of rebuilding, or the time could be shortened, or the registration process could be retrospective. It would still need to be there. In my view, that was a far more satisfactory approach. I would have had much more confidence in that approach as a Member of Parliament. For some reason, and we've gone through the whole debate without an explanation, for some reason that approach was overridden, and as an alternative we had what some people may describe as draconian, but I would certainly describe as extreme legislation. So that's what we're passing now in its final stages as we speak. The Minister has put on record, in fact both Minister Brownlee and Minister Smith have put on record their responses to our concerns and to our questions. They have had opportunities for amendments put before them. They have had discussions about that with Kennedy Graham, who made 6 proposed amendments to this legislation. Some of them our party agreed with and others didn't. We had good discussions about the reasons for that. The Green Party didn't agree with us, obviously, but we had a albeit rather brief opportunity, but at least some opportunity to discuss our reasons for supporting and opposing others. The Minister likewise had an opportunity to consider them. He didn't take much of that opportunity, actually, and I think it was a wasted opportunity. There were proposed amendments in Kennedy Graham's name and in my name, actually, including one on behalf of the Honourable Jim Anderton, which in my view would have improved the legislation, would have given us more confidence in what is a very extreme measure being less likely to cause public disquiet and concern. The last thing I want is to come back to this House and feel the same as we have through the leaky building syndrome, where local government and central government have pointed their fingers at each other and said it's your fault, you should pay, while the homeowners bear the brunt of the 1990s mistakes of this Parliament. In my view, rush legislation often has that risk attached, and quite often members of different parties will see things from a different perspective and say, if this is a problem, here's the solution. I think that the Minister, Jerry Brownlee, could have made more of that opportunity tonight, but he didn't. Well, Mr Speaker, I'm pleased that we're passing this legislation. I want our Parliament to give Canterbury the message that we support our recovery. That's a good message for us to hear. I urged a previous speaker in the chair to consider his region, Southland region, and also consider the fact that a major boost to the morale of Canterbury would be for us to have our shield back that Southland borrowed for a little while, and I hope that he is considering that, because that would also give us a good boost. But seriously, this bill will help. It has risks attached to it. And we will be keeping an eye on the implementation of this legislation to ensure that none of the concerns that we have come to fruition. We don't want a concrete slab city. We don't want trucks able to use our roads when they're risky and tear them up even more than they've been destroyed. And we don't want our historic architecture removed from the landscape forever. We want as much of the beauty of our city retained for the future as possible. We want our citizens to have a place to work, a place to live, and a healthy city to continue to thrive in. That is a big ask. We've got a lot of work to do, but Parliament has given its support to that. The local members of Parliament have all worked tirelessly to help the residents of our city, and I certainly hope that that support and that approach continues.